first, I needed to contend with my relationship to feminism. That was sort of the entry point for me, and to understand the relevance of our position as women in the fight against our own injustices, and to see how I may have taken the bait of what I think is one of the biggest Psy-Ops that's ever crossed our paths collectively, which is feminism, and specifically the recent wave. And that's not to say that it does not hold space for some very, very important energies of pain and intergenerational grief. But it's to recognize how this is being, in my world, it's called a louche ritual, right? How this is literally being harvested energetically. The emotional currency of the victim consciousness that is held by so many women right now in their righteousness, in their entitled anger, is actually being used and leveraged for a specific agenda, right? And so, if you look into the origins of the feminist movement, you might come across, some telltale, now it's probably not on YouTube anymore, but Aaron Russo talking to a Rockefeller, about the Rockefeller funding of the feminist movement, and not for the reasons that one might think, for the liberation of all women and their equal, right to vote, and to secure their position in the workplace. There's another lens that says it was to increase the pool of taxpayers, to double it actually, and to remove, to fragment the home, right? To remove women from the home so that their children could be industrialized in, what most people now understand who've looked at education is, the way you create automatons out of free spirits.
Right.
And so if that's what was behind it, and it was funded for, at least that primary reason, then what else have we fallen for? And I do think the war on masculinity is one of the very essential elements of the current agenda, because when you have emasculated, and I would go so far as to say energetically castrated men, you have a very vulnerable population. And when there aren't men at the helm to guide, direct, protect, then the capture of that population is secured. And so when we as women imagine that what we want is men cowering and apologizing, right? And we spit vitriol at them and, just entrap them in this utterly disorienting and confusing place of, it's like I could almost feel it in my body, like, what the fuck do I do, right? Like, I can imagine, empathically what it must be like as a man today. Like, how do I be? And obviously, you're doing your very significant part to blaze this trail. But the average dude is like, I don't know how to be. Do I apologize? Do I, get on a knee? Do I bow down? Do I to take out my sword? What do I do? How do I do good, right? Like, how do I be a good boy? And this posture that so many women have adversarially towards men, I do think is the greatest detriment to their own fulfillment, right? Because I was speaking at the Weston Price conference recently, and there was like 2,000 people there, and somebody was asking me about gender politics and my perspective on it or whatever. And I said, just as a part of the answer, I was like, I don't know a woman who doesn't, let's say a heterosexual woman, who doesn't want to be well handled by a strong and powerful man. And literally this sigh swept through the audience. It's almost like they could almost like men and women alike, it's like they could feel like, oh yes, that's actually what I want. So if that's what you want as a woman, you cannot have that, right? If you are relating to a man that you are in a posture of disrespect, distrust, and otherwise power over toward, it's just not available, right? So that's not how you get what you want. So how do you get what you want? Are you just supposed to revert to lipstick and eyelashes and being your flirty bubbly version of yourself and hope that that works out, and that you're not like raped and abused, right? Like we're just in this total state of warfare. And I think until we come into an understanding of the power of the technology of man-woman relating, and it's erotic, yes, but it's also societal, it's sociocultural, right? So the way that I relate to the man who, might pick up my suitcase and put it in the bin on the airplane is actually holofractal, right? Like how I relate to him is how I relate to my father, is how I relate to my partner, is how I relate to my inner masculine.
Right.
So it's the healing of this polarity. And it starts with recognizing that if what we say we want is the safety that only men in a society can offer to the population, to the women, the children, and to the other men, right? Because I'm obsessed with Viking shows recently, right? And so I watch these scenes, right, where like a man is in trouble, right? And his fucking dudes come to the rescue, right?
Yeah.
So when as a man, you don't have other men at your back, you cannot man properly.
Right.
And as a woman, when you do not have not one man, but men at your back, you cannot be a woman. I actually think this is how we are designed to relate to each other across the gender divide. And so this is obviously my bias. I'm not saying this is how it is. However, this is the lens that I started to look through. And then, of course, I saw, okay, like what else are some of the achievements of feminism? Birth control pill, medicalized birth, the all sorts of screenings to funnel you into the pharmaceutical based model of allopathy. I mean, I remember when I was in medical school, I was like very excited about the HPV vaccine and, was on birth control for 12 years, thinking that these are entitlements of my womanhood and are offerings to my experience as a woman. And I felt certain I would have an elective C-section because why would you have pain that you don't have to have? That's just stupid, right? So like that consciousness, it creates the space and the conditions for a lot of other, and at least from my perspective, highly disempowering engagements of the female body by a woman, right? So the way that I relate to birth as a woman, that defines my relationship to my own vital force energy, in my opinion, right? So if I am enculturated to believe, that a doctor knows better how I should birth a baby and that, my partner's emasculation at the hands of this doctor while I, circumcise that baby who's just been pried out of me, through a slit in my belly. And then this baby's early initiation into a system that will command his biology and his experience of his own human flesh, right, through fear. Well, that's quite an extraordinary, matrix to have established. And it starts with a woman relating to her own womanhood through the lens of conventional feminism. And so I really had to reckon with that, right? And